the joy to bring back to you a man that I know will be a blessing to you, Texe Mars. God bless you. You may be seated as he comes.
Well, now I'm fully armed. I have the Bible, and my wife got my second pair of glasses. Now I can actually read some quotes to you and maybe make more sense. I have 3 or 4 pair of glasses running around. They're sort of drugstore type glasses anyway. And it's always good to have them, you know, in case you step on a pair or sit on a pair or leave a pair in a bookstore somewhere, which I do constantly. If they were the prescription kind, I guess I'd just be out of luck and I'd be bankrupt, having lost so many. The same thing with fountain pens. How about you men? My wife bought one of those really nice fountain pens for Christmas. I have been looking for that thing. Wanda, this is so you wouldn't get mad here. I'm telling you in front of all these people, I can't find your pen. I've been looking for 7 years now and hiding it, but I'll find it. It's somewhere. Well, there's a verse in the Bible I really like, I really appreciate. It talks about wisdom. It talks about being prudent. It's from Proverbs 22, verse 3. It says, a prudent man, that means a wise man, a prudent man foreseeth the evil and hideth himself, but the simple pass on and are punished. Well, what does that mean? Well, it means that a wise person, made wise by the knowledge of God's prophetic word, looks ahead. He sees the evil before it even arrives, and he hides himself. Now, how do you hide yourself? You hide yourself under the wings of God's protection. He prepares. He gets ready. He's prayed up. He's set. But the stupid, the ignorant, the Bible calls them the simple. Now, by the way, these people could have PhDs, and many do. I met many when I taught at the University of Texas at Austin. They're really stupid, but they scored high on IQ tests. The simple pass on and are punished. I like that. You know, in Daniel chapter 12, verse 10 is actually my favorite verse, though. It says, in the last days the wicked shall do wickedly, but none of the wicked will understand what's going on. But the wise shall understand. I like that. A lot of people say, how can I understand Bible prophecy? Well, you can't unless God instructs you. But he will if you pray and ask him to, because it's found in his word. The prudent, the wise foresee the evil that's coming. I think that's why you're here tonight. It's not for entertainment. I mean, you could be watching sitcoms or something on TV, I suppose, if you just wanted entertainment. Or you might go to a huge crusade where everybody's laughing and growling and laying on the floor and doing all kinds of things. You can have a good time, holy dancing or whatever. But I suppose you're here because you believe it's prudent and wise to foresee the evil that's coming, and knowing the things that are to take place, it makes you a different person. Peter said, did he not? Knowing these things are going to occur, he said, what kind of a man should you be? It'll change your life. You'll not just become a better man, you'll become a wise man or woman. Well, I want you to know about some things that are coming. There's a lot of talk, and it's pretty proven, by the way. It's not just idle rumors about black helicopters. They're the militias that are forming up around the country. There's even talk of detention centers being set up, concentration camps, foreign military units and equipment being seen, observed throughout the United States. What about that? It sounds a little crazy, doesn't it? It really does. Let me give you one report from one group. These are people, I've talked to the gentleman, Mr. T.C. Fry. He seems actually like he might be sane. Yeah, he might be okay. But here's what he States. He says, did you know that there are 4 massive crematoriums in the United States of America, now complete with gas chambers and guillotines, that they can handle more than 3,000 cremations each day, that the chief one is the old Amtrak repair station in Indianapolis, Indiana, that other huge crematoriums are in or near Oklahoma City and Kansas City, Missouri, that the New World Order symbol, the all-seeing satanic eye above a pyramid, appears above each of the steel entrance gates to the Kansas City facility. Did you know that there are more than 130 concentration camps already set up from Florida to Alaska, and that more than 2 million Americans are already on computer lists for detention and liquidation? Well, that's pretty preposterous, isn't it? Well, the man has not been committed as of yet. But let's look at this. Could this be true? It sounds unbelievable. And there are other groups. Here's one, for example. Here's taken off of a computer bulletin board by another organization. Says there has been established a Gulag USA. Remember the gulags in Soviet Russia? Alexander Solzhenitsyn talked about concentration camps, forced labor camps. It says these civilian concentration camps have been established under the Rex 84 program. And then he lists them, this individual, this organization. Fort Huachuca, Arizona, Fort Chaffee, Arkansas, Oakdale, California, Vanden. Could that be true? I mean, what is Rex 84? Is there such a program? You know, as I begin to get more and more reports over the years of these so-called black helicopters and the possibility that there actually could be a plan to build concentration camps to put us in, I decided to do more than just ask questions. I decided to really investigate this. Now, God has given me a lot of tools of investigation. I have a lot of friends out there. Some are former CIA, some are presently in intelligence, and some I can trust and some I can't trust. And some are old Air Force friends of mine now in various government agencies, because I spent over 20 years in the Air Force, retired as an officer. A lot of contacts. And then God has given me a lot of people since I founded the ministry in 86, 87. And there are a lot of strange people out there investigating and researching and examining. I found, for example, that there is something called Rex 84. And it actually is, believe it or not, even according to the New York Times, which I hate to quote from because they lie so much. Just a liberal rag. You know, I don't know if the Charlotte Observer is any better. But the New York Times, I just don't like to quote them. But I'll go ahead and say that the New York Times says there was a Rex 84 program. They say that Oliver North was in charge of it, that William Casey, as the CIA director, was Ollie North's boss. And knowing Ollie North as I do, I can tell you, the guy's a no-good. He's a rat. And he did indeed give us Rex 84, a concentration camp program, a plan to round up dissenters and disruptors, so-called, of government, and to take away their constitutional rights and put them in so-called detention centers. These would be run by the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA. And that plan, by the way, that unconstitutional plan of this government within a government, and many of these things have not fully come out. But by the way, you can go to the library and read about Rex 84. Go back into the files. Read what the New York Times and the Washington Post and the Associated Press said. And then maybe you can go even further. Rex 84, that's right, they had the plan. It existed. I wanted to know why they called it Rex 84. Well, it was promulgated in the 83, 84, 85 era, in the 80s. But why the word Rex? Well, you see, there was, and I believe there was a group known as the Illuminati. The Illuminati. It was established in 1776 by a man over in Europe named Adam Weishaupt. He was a Jesuit priest, he was a Mason, and he founded the Illuminati. And Americans certainly knew about it. George Washington did. I've gone back and I've studied the writings of George Washington. There's a letter in his records which George Washington wrote a friend in Great Britain. And he said, quote, "Of the existence of the Illuminati, I have no doubt." George Washington knew of the existence of the Illuminati. It existed in Europe at the same time as this nation was being founded. And there is another story that we can talk about someday. The Illuminati. I found that the Illuminati had 13 degrees or initiations. The highest degree was known as Rex. When you received this degree, you became Rex. Well, what does Rex mean? It's simply a Latin name meaning divine king. You become a divine king. You become a God-man at the 13th degree of the Illuminati. And so, here was the plan, which signified the highest degree of the Illuminati, Rex. And it was a plan for concentration camps. Now, even before the 80s, evidently there existed a plan. I came upon an interesting document. A man named William R. Pabst put out this booklet. You notice that it's not printed in the finest perfect binding with glossy cover, but the title is very descriptive. It simply is called Concentration Camp Plans for U.S. Citizens. Concentration Camp Plans for U.S. Citizens. Well, I wanted to know who Mr. Pabst was, and I tried to contact Mr. Pabst because this was put out in the 70s. I found that Mr. Pabst doesn't seem to exist anymore. He has vanished from the face of the planet Earth. But I know he did exist. I know because I have gone back and researched the court records, and I know that a William R. Pabst of Houston, Texas, sued the federal government. I know that also because I have in this booklet a copy of the lawsuit. He lost in the district court, and then he sued, and it went to the federal court of appeals. You see, Mr. Pabst says that the government was doing something bad and unconstitutional by setting up a concentration camp program for America, secret, that would someday be used. And he sued the government, demanding that they provide information for two secretive projects, highly classified. One called Operation Cable Splicer, and the other one called Operation Garden Plot. And you know what? They didn't want him to have those plans. And they fought him tooth and nail. Did the plans exist? Oh, yes. That's why the government didn't want to give them to just a common, simple citizen. They said that these plans were classified and could not be released. Now, Mr. Pabst said he was an American and he had a right to know what was in those plans. Now, let me read to you in the Federal Court of Appeals, I'm sorry, we'll go first to the U.S. District Court, what Judge Norman Black said. Now, this is the judge who was head of the U.S. District Court, Southern District of Texas, Houston, Texas, Federal District Court. He says, and this is now from the court transcript, referring to Mr. Pabst. He says, "What I have seen so far, Mr. Pabst, from your offer of proof indicates to me that there is no question, but there exists a program for the internment of prisoners of war and civilian internees. I don't think there is any question, however, that the documentation that you have shown me does not prove that the information should be released to you." The judge went on to say, "You do not have jurisdiction." In other words, you're just one citizen. It's not an important, you're not important enough to be given this classified information, all right? He denied that this person had jurisdiction. And yet Mr. Pabst evidently had somehow stumbled onto something called Operation Cable Slicer and Operation Garden Plot. Now, Mr. Pabst was quite concerned also because he found out that there was an Army manual. And I have a copy also of that manual. It's Field Manual, I think it's 4110. Let's see if we can find it here. This manual tells the Army how to set up detention camps and how to treat the prisoners that are taken to those camps. And in addition to this FM 4110 of the Army, Mr. Pabst was able to produce for the court the disaster preparedness plan for one military installation alone, the Marine Corps Supply Center at Barstow, California. He found some interesting things in there. He found that if there were civil disturbances and riots, that the military would be given power to identify, arrest, incarcerate, interrogate, and quote-unquote detain citizens without constitutional problems being considered. They call it guidance for quote-unquote certain situations. It says, quote, commanders have the authority and responsibility to use any means reasonably necessary to round up civilians. This disaster preparedness plan actually talked about something called Garden Plot and said it would be implemented, if necessary, under the direction of the Secretary of the Army. There's even here as part of the plan, I have a copy of it says an example of a notice specifying hours of curfew in occupied territory. And here is a notice that will be put in public places, and what it says is, until further notice, no persons will be permitted to circulate on the streets or outside his own house without a permit from the authorities, and it's to be signed by a Major General of the U.S. Army. Here we have a situation where the military evidently someday is going to be used, if necessary, to round up civilians and to detain them. There's even diagrams in the Army's manual showing how the camps will be set up. Here will be where the people sleep in the tents. Here will be where they eat. Here's where they will be checked medically, etc. Sounds pretty preposterous, doesn't it? Then I came across something very interesting. This is from Automatic ID News. This is for automated data capture system user. Very interesting. Did you know the government has a really exciting system now? It's called a human tracking system. And they've spent millions, and it was used in the Haitian, Cuban exodus. All those people, the boat people coming over, they had to have a way, they said, to classify them, to identify them, and to keep track of them. And so they had it all automated. And it's actually called this. It's called the Deployable Mass Population Tracking and Identification System. Everybody was given a bracelet. The bracelet contained a computer chip. They were told they could not take off their bracelet. If they took off their bracelet, they could not eat. They wouldn't be given a bed to sleep. A bracelet, identification bracelet. The bracelet, this chip had all of the information pertaining to them programmed into it. Their name, their sex, their age, their status, etc. And here this, in the Automatic ID News, is all of the information you have. Here's a guy putting one of these on. By the way, you can't take it off. You even take a shower with it. They rivet it on with a riveting tool onto your wrist. Now, they said smaller refugees will wear an ankle bracelet with a computer chip 24 hours a day. It goes on also to show how people will not only be identified with this, but just in case they are able to get it off by some manner, they will also be tracked using their fingerprint. And there were set up fingerprint scanning devices in the camps. And here, for example, shows the fingerprints and how it works with the computer. Here, by the way, is a copy of the transponders, the identity bracelets, and so forth. And here's documentation from the Department of Defense talking about the effectiveness of it and the planned improvements. Here shows the computer's networking. It's called the Deployable Mass Population Identification and Tracking System. Interesting, isn't it? They've got the means now, a lot better than what the Nazis had and the Russians, to track you, to put you where they want you to go, and to keep you there. Well, I kept pondering this. By the way, they could go even further than that, than just having something to wear. For example, in Iraq, here's an article, Associated Press just came out recently, April 23rd. It says, Iraq has been marking deserters' foreheads with an X. And also, by the way, they're amputating the right hands of thieves and doing other things. How'd you like to have your forehead marked with an X? That's sort of interesting. X is the mark of the great Egyptian god Osiris. That was his mark, the X. That's where it came from. You know, the thing about just put your X right here? If you couldn't write, means you were signifying, I swear by the great god Osiris that this is truly me. And I'm authenticating this particular document. Well, goodness. Now, surely, this is for refugees, and surely Mr. Pabst is all wet. But then we go to the Bible. That's where you have to really start from. And you know it says in Revelation 13, verses 6 through 8, something very interesting. It talks about this beast system in the last days, and the Antichrist. And we read there in Revelation 13 this statement. That first of all, this will be a blasphemous person. Blasphemous person. He'll mock God. Daniel says that he's devious and a liar and deceptive because he speaks dark sentences. Revelation says he'll make war with the saints and overcome them. Let me say that again. He will make war with the saints and overcome them. You say, how can he overcome you? I'm talking about physically for a while. I'm not talking about eternally. But he will make war with the saints and overcome them. And of course it also says he will require all to take a mark, either in their right hand or in their forehead. The mark, or the name, or the number of the beast, which is of course 666. Well, there is going to be a system then so that no man can buy or sell save he that has the mark, or the name, or the number of the beast. Well, then that makes these things a lot more reasonable, doesn't it? And when we read Revelation chapter 6, and it tells us about this pale horse rider who brings death. Death follows with them. Makes you wonder. Well, now who, I asked the question, would be targeted for death? Who is really the enemy? Well, I found that Janet Reno, I call her Butch Reno, she already has defined who the enemies are. They're cultists. And everybody hates cultists. They burned them alive in Waco, and most of America said, great. What's next on the Sally Jesse Raphael show today? Charming. Look at those flames licking there at that building. Isn't that exciting? This is better than the latest karate movie. And of course, they couldn't hear the screams, could they, of the children in there and the babies as they burned to death and suffocated. From CS gas, by the way, that has been banned by international treaty to be used in warfare. It's okay for us to use it on children, but we couldn't use it against the Iraqis, of course. That would be breaking international law. Well, here's what Janet Reno said. By the way, this was on 60 Minutes. It's been reported in many other publications. I'll be glad to give it to you in writing. I've got about 20 places where it's been reported, various magazines. Attorney General Janet Reno, justifying her order which led to the murder of 79 Branch Davidians in Waco. By the way, nobody really knows how many died, but some say 79, some say 87, 83. Has given this definition of a cultist. Now listen up, friends. Do you know any of these evil people? You may know some. The person sitting next to you might be one of them that deserves a fiery death. A cultist, says Janet Reno, is one who has a strong belief in the Bible and the second coming of Christ. Well, I know a few like that. No, not many. Not most Baptist churches, not most Methodists, not most Episcopal, not most Pentecostal churches today. But there's a few. I know a few people like that. Wow, I didn't know they were cultists. Did you? A cultist is one who has a strong belief in the Bible and the second coming of Christ. Now, that's one of the things. Now, there are other ways to identify these horrid people. Let me tell you some of the other ways Janet Reno is given. And obviously, she's our Attorney General. She's honest. She knows. She's got the FBI under her authority. She's got the entire Justice Department. Smart gal. A cultist is one who has a strong belief in the Bible and the second coming of Christ, who frequently attends Bible studies. Wow, that makes it really bad. I mean, it's terrible enough just to believe in the Bible. If you have to go to those mean old Bible studies, that could make you a horrible person. Set you apart. No wonder you're a cultist. Not many people doing that. Just a few little groups here and there studying the Bible. Dangerous. A menace. Who has a high level of financial giving to Christian causes. Do not give to Joe Chambers' ministry to help him build that new building. Do you know that if you write that check, probably if some of you may have written a check, put it in the offering plate. And by the way, my honorarium goes to my ministry, and we're going to keep sending out our newsletter free and do many other wonderful things with whatever you've given. But of course, that means you're targeted as a cultist for having given, because you're a giver to Christian causes. You're a very bad person. I love you anyway, don't get me wrong. Now let me keep going. This Janet Reno, I'm quoting her, who homeschools his children. Oh! Is there anyone here that homeschools their children? You, sir, you are a cultist. Don't try to deny it. I know you may not believe like David Koresh, but you believe in the second coming of Christ. And he didn't believe that. He thought he was Christ. Of course, I have a friend that told me, it was like two scorpions in a bottle. So the problem with David Koresh was he thought he was Christ. The problem with the government was they thought they were God. Who has accumulated survival foods? Well, mine are mostly in my stomach. I could survive a lot longer than you skinny people. You better get you some dry foods and put it up. And has a strong belief in the Second Amendment that says you have the right to keep and bear arms. That right will not be infringed. I always ask the people who don't believe in that, what part of the word infringed is it they don't understand? You didn't get that, did you? Okay. But that's a cultist. He believes in the Second Amendment. Might even have one of those old guns hiding out somewhere. We have some of those in Texas, And who distrust big government. Yeah, that's Janet Reno on 60 Minutes. Do you distrust big government? Do you go to Bible studies? Do you give to Christian causes? Do you believe in the Bible? Do you believe in Jesus' second coming? Okay, they're at the back door right now to take you away. Well, here's another article. I've got several, in fact, one from Don McElvaney's intelligence advisor. Here's another one from another newspaper. Attorney General Janet Reno compiles lists. Christians and patriots viewed as potential terrorists. That's you. In late February or early March 1984, Attorney General Janet Reno issued a confidential memo to the Justice Department and the U.S. attorneys calling for an investigation against, quote, right-wing and fundamentalist Christians. The secret memo, signed by Janet Reno personally, was sent to U.S. attorneys in Mississippi, Louisiana, Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, Idaho, Montana, and Washington State. It says the FBI will be conducting extensive investigations and surveillance of right-wing political and fundamentalist religious individuals and organizations in those states. They don't have to investigate, Joe. They just turn on the 5 o'clock news. And they find out about him. Joe will tell them. I had the FBI investigating me where our offices used to be. The people that now own that building called me and said, Texe, just wanted you to know there was an FBI agent looking for you last night. They said he even left us his card. I said, good. I said, did you tell him where we're at now? They said, yes. Well, I didn't want to wait for the guy to come to see me, so I called him up and invited him to come to my office. I said, we got a coffee pot here. No reason for you to go behind my back asking people questions about me. You can just come see me. I'll tell you anything. I'll show you my bank statements. I'll give you anything you need. No, he didn't come. I don't know. Yeah. I told him I'd show him all of those guns I've got stored away, the bazookas and the nuclear bombs. Wanda said, I haven't seen those myself. Well, you see, I do have a weapon. And to some people, it's a secret weapon. It's God's Word. That's all I've got. And if they come to my ministry, they'll get shot with God's Word. That's it. That's all I need. That's it. But it's a dangerous thing, isn't it? I was reading, by the way, President Clinton, I want to know what he thought about all this. Very interesting. He was over in Germany, and he said something there with the German chancellor sitting there. I want to read you this quote. I thought it was sort of a, you know, I used to teach psychology before I renounced it all. It's silliness. In fact, I've repented for it, ever teaching psychology at university level. Here's what Bill said. He said, quote, our two nations and Germany. I don't know how it could, he made a mistake right there. Our two nations and Germany. He was in Germany. He didn't learn basic math. Our two nations in Germany have increased cooperation and engaged in joint terrorist training. I think he meant anti-terrorist training. But on the other hand, with the BATF and the FBI and the CIA and the DEA and now the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the National Park Service Rangers and the Department of Energy, they have their own. Some gentleman was here talking about he drives a gasoline truck, and they got some people now in driving gray vehicles, and they got their own. They stopped him and wanted to inspect. He said, I've already had my DMV inspection. They said, we're not DMV. We're from some other government agency. Hey, it's the alphabet cops. They're everywhere. And they're conducting terrorist training. That means they're the terrorists. I'm sure Bill Clinton meant anti-terrorist training, don't you think? Sure. You don't think he did? I also wanted to know what other people thought about this from countries that used to have concentration camps, like Russia and Eastern Europe. Very interesting newsletter from Pastor George Udvari. Now, let me tell you what he says. He's from the New Harmony Christian Crusade out of Mid-Pines, California. He wrote this in his newsletter. He says, I now find myself experiencing many of the same problems that plagued my country of Hungary under communist dictatorship nearly 4 decades ago, when we lived in fear of authorities and could not cast them off by voting against them. Do you really trust those voting machines? Only 3 countries in the United States maintain all of the voting machines in America. One book recently put out, Vote Scam, says that the mafia controls those 3 voting machine maintenance companies. Think about that. I think we better go back to paper ballots. He says, we lived in fear of authorities and could not cast them off. Their decision was arbitrary and represented the will of a small minority of communists backed up by the mighty power of the godless Soviet Empire. He says, I saw people in forced labor and concentration camps in communism who had opposed the system, and I personally knew many who died in them. Now, says this pastor, now I see concentration camps being built and activated right here in America during the last few years. It is no longer a secret, he writes. The horrors of Stalin's tortuous death camps of Siberia are now transplanted onto American soil for those who are to be categorized, identified, or classified as dissenters or reactionaries against the soon-coming New World Order. He writes, this is not an opinion or a wild exaggeration. But I ask again, if this gentleman is right, he escaped Hungary only to come to a country where they're beginning to do the same thing. The early stages, the birth pangs, so to speak. Who would they target? Well, I opened up the Austin American-Statesman, and here was the New York Times. This was published in newspapers across the country. It says, Robertson's book, that's Pat Robertson, resembles Farrakhan's tirade. The man goes on to say that Pat Robertson and the Christian Coalition are no different than Louis Farrakhan and those horrid black Muslims. They're all anti-Semitic Jew haters. Now, friends, I can tell you a lot about Pat Robertson, but one thing I can tell you is he's not a Jew hater. That's absolutely a lie. But there's a group called the Jewish Anti-Defamation League, which really defames Jews because they lie. And even good Jews know they're a bunch of liars. I say good Jews, I mean Jews who may not be Christians, but at least they're moral and believe in conservative values. And I pray that they'll someday come to know Jesus Christ. They know the Jewish ADL are just a bunch of liars, Masonic liars. But the Jewish ADL also put out a report that says the entire religious right are a bunch of bigots and haters and anti-Semites. People like James Dobson and Jerry Falwell and Pat Robertson. Now, folks, we may have a lot of problems with those names, but I'll tell you, they're not bigots and haters and Jewish detesters. It's just a lie. But you see, those whom you will destroy, you must first brand as the enemy, as the menace to society. Now, if they're going to brand the Jerry Falwells and the Pat Robertsons, what do you think they're going to do if you're really a hardcore fundamentalist? I mean, Pat Robertson even denies the rapture. That's right. He says there will be just a minor dislocation, but he doesn't believe in the rapture anymore. He really doesn't even believe that in the second coming of Christ. He must not be a cultist. If they consider him a hater, what do you think they're going to think about you? You're really bad off. Jerry Falwell at least works with the Catholics hand in hand. He even goes to Reverend Sun Myung Moon's meetings. You don't do that, what do you think they're going to think about you? You're a hardcore fundamentalist, probably. You're a bad boy or girl. Well, the plan. Has the plan really been formulated for concentration camps? It has. It really has. There is, maybe some of you do not realize, an executive order that has been signed by President Clinton. It's actually been signed by every president since, with some amendments and modifications, since Franklin D. Roosevelt. Executive order. This particular one was signed June 3rd, 1994. I have a copy of it explaining it. Executive order number 12919, signed June 3rd, 1994 by President William J. Clinton, entitled the National Defense Industrial Resources Preparedness. You say, what does all that mean? What it means is there's a little group called FEMA, those same FEMA boys. And they're allowed to set up America, not into 50 states, but into 10 regions or areas, and then to control everything that takes place in America. If a national crisis is declared simply by the president, not the Congress, no declaration of war according to the Constitution, he simply says, we have a national crisis, a dictatorship, the Rex plan will immediately go into effect in America. Let me give you some of the executive orders signed. Executive orders, not congressional acts. I could give you the numbers, 10995, 10997, but I won't. Here's what the subject matter is. The first order. All communications media will be seized by the federal government. Second, seizure of all electrical power, fuels, including gasoline and minerals. Third, seizure of all food resources, farms and farm equipment. Fourth, seizure of all kinds of transportation, including your personal car, and control of all highways and seaports. Next, seizure of all civilians. They will be required to work under federal government supervision. Next, federal takeover over all health, education, and welfare. And it goes on and on. You say they can't do that. Here's a newspaper article saying they can do that. It says, dictatorial powers for the FEMA. Introduced into Congress by Barbara Mikulski. Now, they already are doing this, but they'd like to. It'd be nice if they could have a law, you know, after the fact, giving them the authority. So this liberal senator has introduced it. Here's a copy of it, Senate Bill 1697. It says to improve the ability of the federal government to prepare for and respond to major disasters and for other purposes. What does that mean? And for other purposes. Oh, I thought FEMA would take care of us in case of tornadoes and hurricanes and things like that. What are those other purposes that they'll be given dictatorial control? Well, my good friend R.E. McMaster says in his The Reaper report something very interesting. He says, quote, FEMA concentrates efforts and finances on detention camps and facilities for dissident civilians. FEMA is a New World Order agency for concentration camps. Their facilities now total 43. Each site can hold 32,000 to 42,000 detainees. Oklahoma City is the processing point west of the Mississippi. And he quotes Dr. Anthony Sutton of the Phoenix Letter, formerly of the Hoover Institution. Now, how could this possibly occur? What kind of crisis could occur? Could it be race riots? What could occur? Well, you know, over in Davos, Switzerland recently, one of the richest men in the world, George Soros, talked about the coming financial crisis. Here is an Associated Press report. It says, Soros, multi-billionaire, warns of global disorder. Global disorder. He says eventually the world's financial markets, the weaknesses have already been shown in the dollar and the Mexican peso and such. It's only a matter of time before a financial crisis hits the whole world. Millions will be thrown out of work. People will riot in the street. It'll be a national crisis, and then will come the world government. Read my book, Dark Majesty. It'll show you Maurice Strong, you know, the man I talked about before, the United Nations Environmental Program, what he has to say about this. He's a member of that little distinguished group that goes to Davos, Switzerland each year at the World Economic Forum and decides your financial future. Well, you know, I should have known that, and you should have known that it was going to come down to money. It's going to come down to money, my friends, because Paul wrote in his letter to Timothy that the love of money is the root of all evil. Now, TV makes you think it's sex, but it's not. It's money. If you got money, you can buy sex if you're a sinful person. Money. It has to do with money. Got these pictures, for example, of the new United States Mint that's going to be printing the new rainbow-colored money that you're going to be getting very soon. Now, that's been delayed because of citizen protests for a few years. But believe me, I'll be shocked if it doesn't come in '95. I've been shocked before. This is not a prophecy. But you will have new colored money. The greenback is going to go out. And it will be a halfway house to a world currency, a global currency. They even have a name for it. They call it the Phoenix. And there is an occult reason for that actually is revealed in Isaiah in the Bible. But here is a picture of the new mint. It's in Fort Worth, Texas. New high-tech equipment. You can't get in there, but it's interesting that we were able to obtain pictures. Here is the mint. It's a circular building with a pyramid on top. And a square is painted on top of the circle. Now you have to understand what the triangle or the circle or the pyramid is within the circle in Freemasonry, in esoteric or occult Freemasonry. What it means basically is a return to Babylon, to Egypt. The whole world will be one once again. The Tower of Babel will be rebuilt. The circle indicates, of course, that Satan will reign forever in an unbroken reign, a lying boast of the devil. The pyramid brings you right back to Egypt and the great pharaohs. And of course, God said, come out of her, my people. Come out of Egypt, my people. But these people want to bring us right back into it. Now, it should not surprise you that the new U.S. Mint was actually designed in an occult pattern. The devil enjoys being the power of the air and looking down on his temples of the Illuminati, his satanic architecture. But then he's also put it on your dollar bill, hasn't he? The all-seeing eye of the devil over his pyramid is on your dollar bill. The great sun god of the ancients. And underneath it, The inscription, Novus Ordo Seclorum, or New World Order. Here's some more photos of that mint, the U.S. Mint out of Fort Worth. By the way, the land was donated to the government by Ross Perot, H. Ross Perot. And there's a lot of things about Ross Perot that people don't know. But the government was very nice to him. They gave him an airport worth $129 million from your taxpayer dollars there in Fort Worth, even though it wasn't needed. But the rich and the Illuminati can fly in and out without benefit of going through customs like the little people. They can bring in their drugs and their slaves and their contraband without worrying about the problems that may befall you going through the Charlotte International Airport. Here is an actual aerial shot. Now, you may wonder where we got these pictures from. By the way, here is a copy of the front gate. It's actually two pyramids, like devil horns, side by side. That's the front entry of this facility. Well, we obtained them actually from the U.S. Mint. The architect was very proud. He says that he is a Mason. And he admits that they were designed according to Freemasonry principles. Now, since Freemasonry is religion, according to Albert Mackey, 33rd Degrees, Encyclopedia of Freemasonry, why is it that your taxpayer dollars are going to support religion? Perhaps I need to talk to Madalyn Murray O'Hair about that once again. It doesn't seem that many Christians are worried about it. Maybe Madalyn Murray O'Hair could be concerned. I doubt it. I doubt it. Well, is there anything you can do to hide from this if you don't want to hide under God's protective wings? I don't think so. Here's an article in the USA Today, October 4th, 94. It says a National Security Office has been created. The Justice Department has opened up a new office Monday to develop policies on national security and coordinate the international work of law enforcement agencies. Secretary of State Warren Christopher calls the new Executive Office of National Security. Did you know they now have an Executive Office of National Security? I found out they even have new badges for the police. They're going to have a national police force. You know, Hitler created one in Nazi Germany. And in 1938, he passed his Gun Control Act, which, by the way, is a carbon copy. America copied it in 1968. Some Jewish friends of mine, they're in an organization called Jews for the Preservation of Firearms Ownership. They're conservative Jews. They said, Tex, we did research. We found out that Hitler's 1938 Gun Control Act is word for word the same as America's 1968 Gun Control Act. We found out that it was Senator Thomas Dodd who introduced this act, and he was a member of the Nuremberg War Crimes Tribunal. He knew all about the Nazi Gun Control Act. He must have lacked it a lot. They found out in going to the Library of Congress of the United States that Senator Dodd, when developing this legislation, had requested that the Library of Congress obtain a copy of the Nazi Gun Control Act and translate it into English and provide it his office. And then it was passed as America's Gun Control Act of 1968. How does it feel to be living under Nazi rule today in America? Isn't that amazing? Amazing story. Well, here are the badges. One says United States Police, and there is the FEMA symbol. By the way, in the FEMA symbol is the circle with a triangle or the pyramid inside of it. I wonder why. That same satanic symbol that's on the new U.S. Mint is used by the FEMA police. Well, can you hide? Is there any way you can hide from these authorities? Got a letter from Lieutenant Colonel Victor Sorley, U.S. Air Force retired. Very interesting. He was concerned because he heard a very strange report that the BATF wasn't happy with what happened at Waco. They want more power. So they went to Janet Reno and to their Secretary of the Treasury, Lloyd Benson, and they said, you know, we need some firepower. We need airplanes that we can put M60 machine guns on. And they ordered the U.S. Marines to turn over to the BATF at least 13 aircraft. The U.S. Marines. And here's the letter. Signed by Joe Barton, member of Congress. Here's the letter. Back to Colonel Sorley. Dear Mr. Sorley, thank you for contacting me regarding the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms acquiring of OV-10 aircraft from the United States Marines. Currently, the BATF and the United States Marines are, in fact, negotiating a deal for the transfer of up to 13 OV-10 aircraft. The aircraft will be given to the BATF from the Marines, but not purchased. Well, you see, they don't have enough money in their budget. They'll just take it from the Defense Department budget. So we have the money that goes to the Defense Department budget being used for the alphabet police agencies. No problem. Well, can you trust the U.S. military? I spent 20 years in the Air Force. I loved it. Still feel like I'm a little bit of a blue suitor today. I don't think so. Because New Ageism has crept in. John Shalikashvili is the first New Age United Nations general as the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He doesn't mind homosexuals in the military. He goes along with Clinton on that one. He doesn't mind turning over command of U.S. forces to United Nations foreign commanders. Shalikashvili, his father, was an officer in the Nazi war machine. Well, no wonder then that I chanced upon this memorandum, a little mouse inside one of the agencies furnished me. This is from the Department of the Army. It's dated 27 July 94. It says, and it's signed, by the way, by C. Dean Rohde, Director of Resource Management for the Army. Enclosed for your review and command is the draft Army regulation on civilian inmate labor utilization and establishing prison camps on Army installations. They've just drafted a regulation and he's sending it around for comment by the higher officials in the Department of the Army. An Army regulation on civilian inmate labor utilization. I guess they're going to work us pretty hard, aren't they? And establishing Army camps. Well, I said, now that really, that's just unbelievable, isn't it? Well, I have so much I could tell you about, but then I came upon this news clipping. It's very interesting. I've been able to confirm this. It says, this is out of Washington, D.C., Associated Press. Revenues from base land sales overestimated. Report says 88% of land from 1988 and 1991 base closings has been kept or transferred. Remember all those military bases they told you they were going to close and save you billions? They didn't do it. They've simply been turned over for other governmental uses. And what could those be? Well, then my friend Terry Cook says, Tex, there's a very strange camp. This camp, he says, is in Nevada. There are no roads to it. There's towers. It is a prison camp. No one knows what this camp is in Nevada. Here's a picture of it. It's a blow-up. I guess they're going to take you in on, I don't know, black helicopters. Sounds very suspicious, doesn't it? This report says that if you think America is going to save a lot of money from the base closings, don't believe it. Even if the military is not there, they're evidently being used for other purposes. It says there's been no property sales. These lands have been changed from one federal agency to another, and FEMA has been given a number of them. I wonder why. You know, right before he left office, President George Bush went to the United Nations, and he said we not only want to cooperate in establishing a United Nations standing military force, but we'll even give you United States military installations we're closing down. You can bring over your United Nations troops and train right here in America. And he said Fort Dix, New Jersey is one of the ones we will give you. Well, recently I contacted Fort Dix authorities, and they say, oh, no. We're not turning this base, this fort, we're closing it, but we're not going to turn it over to the United Nations. That's just a lie. That's not true. I said, but George Bush said it. Oh, well, he said it, but we're not going to do it. I said, what are you using the base for? They said, well, we've set up a prison. A prison? I said, yes, and we already have prisoners here. I said, really? And they said, yes, but we've been ordered to keep a certain number of beds open. 3,000 beds, they said, don't use now. Now, I thought we had a problem, didn't have enough places to put prisoners. But this is a prison camp that's underutilized that was, until 2 years ago, an Army base. Now, the interesting thing about this Army base is it's adjacent to McGuire Air Force Base, New Jersey. Now, I've flown in and out of McGuire Air Force Base, New Jersey, while I was in the Air Force. It is one of the major gathering bases for invading Europe or possibly invading America if other foreign forces are able to take control of it. And I believe they have. And I believe we're cooperating with them. And I believe we are bringing in foreign troops into America. I have a video, we're offering it through our ministry, actually showing Russian troops being trained, Russian Special Forces troops. You know, the same kind that mutilated and massacred innocent civilians in Chechnya. You know where they were trained? They were trained at Fort Polk, Louisiana, by our armed forces. They are butchers and murderers courtesy of the United States military. Unbelievable. Then I came across this news report. Here it is, the Beaumont Enterprise and Journal, November 6, 1994. Politics unexpectedly cause shift in aircraft. For some unexpected reason, it says, 19 Air Force cargo jets as big as wide bodies are being moved from their Louisiana home to a New Jersey base, McGuire, that has neither the space to handle them nor the airspace they need to fly formations. The move to McGuire Air Force Base runs contrary to an Air Force recommendation. It will cost taxpayers at least $150 million. Critics say politics are behind the shift. It's an absolutely goofy decision, says U.S. Senator J. Bennett Johnston of Louisiana. Why are they moving these huge cargo jets to McGuire? Because it's next to Fort Dix, and there's where they have a new prison camp. Well, I decided to do more investigation of Fort Dix then. I came across this newspaper article, the Sunday Star Ledger of New Jersey. This is dated October 30th, 1994. Barracks converted to jailhouses. Fort Dix now the largest federal prison. But the prison is still short of its full capacity. I wonder why. Then here's an article in the New American, April 18, 1994. How many U.S. military bases, it asks, have been disposed of in defense cutbacks? Answer, thus far actual base closings have not reached anywhere near the level stipulated by Congress. Savings have been less than promised. Interesting. By the way, I have here some very interesting news reports. Here's a news report. This comes from the Wisconsin Report. Has a picture. It says, San Francisco cops teach Russians to fight crime. Here they are in their ski mask with their machine guns and all, and they're practicing housebreaking and house-to-house searches. We're teaching the Russian cops how to break into people's homes as marauders. Here's another article. It says, good guys wear black. Now the police can wear black, yet they're the good guys. It says here, if they are ninja-like or even a little Nazi-like, it's not the intent, says Patrolman Peters. But he says, it does terrorize a criminal. The real question, my friends, is, are you a criminal? Janet Reno says, you are. The Bible says the beast will make war against you. But I want to end by saying the Bible says something else. It says that there is a God in heaven. It says he knows how many hairs are on your head. It says he will protect you if you but cry out to him in your time of need. It says he has protected everybody. And I want to end with this quote from Psalms. It reads this way: "The sorrows of death compassed me, and the pains of hell gat hold upon me. I found trouble and sorrow. Then," don't you like that word? "Then call I upon the name of the Lord. Yea, our God is merciful." That's Psalms 116, verses 3 through 5. God bless each of you.